We starting?
We're starting.
All right. Hey.
Hey guys, I'm Christina with Ask a Montessorian. Thank you for watching this video today. I have no idea where the camera thing is. I think it's here. Is it here?
Oh.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. We're fine. We're fine. Happy winter break.
I know. Yes, we're relaxing.
We're relaxing. I joke that I do not do math on breaks or weekends. And yeah, I'm wearing a lounging outfit because I can, you know. And I only have a few more days till I go back, and I'm still doing report cards. I'm taking a break from them. And this is Rango, who has finally, I think, come out of brumation and scared us for a while because all he would do is sleep and not eat. But now he seems to be happy. Say hi, Rango. Anyway, he's our favorite little guy to have around.
And what is he?
He's a bearded dragon.
Nice.
And I think he looks annoyed at me because he was in the sun and now we're not in the sun. Yeah, you're like, where is my son?
He's a little bit chilly.
Yeah, I might move him to the other side.
How old is he?
He's old. He's at least 10 years old as far as we know. He used to be at a Montessori school, and then a family adopted him, and then their kids outgrew him, and we got to have him because we got hooked on bearded dragons from Joey's Montessori school in Lower L, and he took home the bearded dragon for the winter, and we're like, yeah, we want to get one because they're cool. They give you this judgy look, and they're not impressed. But yet, really, they're like dogs. You can train them. This one's potty trained pretty much. I know when he's going to go to the bathroom, and I take him out of his cage and he goes in the yard. My son even walked with him, walking with him on his shoulder, and he knew he had to go, and so I let him go on the sidewalk. And I'm like, oh, that's a new thing. He really is like a dog.
Nice.
But they're fun. Highly recommend for Montessori classrooms because they're fun to hold and love, and they don't mind being held, and I think they actually kind of like it sometimes.
Nice.
And, yeah, easy to take care of. Just give them light and heat and insects, and they're pretty happy. Right, Rango? Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Liza's training because she just finished the 12 to 18 portion of AMI, which is so exciting because it's new. There used to be a 6-week orientation, and now it's 18 months, and then you said now it's 2 years, right?
Yeah, most of the programs that I see out there are 2 years. Some of them are still 18 months. The program that I was in was 18 months, but now it's gone up to 2 years by looking at the calendar, which I think is awesome. You get a longer residential experience next time by a week, which I think is good.
So what is the residential experience?
Okay, so basically the adolescent training is kind of interesting. It is, at least the one that I went to, is standalone. So you don't have to do a prep course. You don't have to have training at other levels. You can come in without any Montessori training and you're good to go. They go over all the levels, 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 12. And they even differentiate between upper and lower elementary. I really enjoyed it. In fact, one of my trainers, they had a lot of trainers at all the levels for guest speakers, and you really have a good foundation. Whereas I feel like my elementary training, yeah, you had the 3 to 6 foundational course, which was really good. I had a really good trainer for that. But you don't know what happens when they leave, you know, so that was something I learned as an elementary teacher, trial by error. So what I like is you're doing training at multiple levels, you're doing observation at multiple levels. You have a lot more time spent with examining your practice as a guide. There's a lot of writing. So even though the class is only, let me think, I think it's like 3 to 4 hours a week in actual class time. Maybe it's 2. Let me think here. Is it 2 hours? Boy, my mind is foggy. This is all on their website, though. I went through Train Montessori. Now you have an option through Sweden. So there's a lot of it that's online, but there's a lot of it that you have to do on your own. They call it asynchronous content. So you go through readings and lectures, and sometimes it's videos where you're observing and you're writing down things. You're going through that independently. You're doing posts. I really like the posts where the people I trained with were all over the world, and we're friends for life. We did a very hard thing, and we're proud of ourselves, and we're supportive of each other, and I love the people that I've trained with.
Now, can they find the website on amiusa.org?
Yeah, so you can find the website on AMI USA. The training started in November. Just realize that the dates are European dates, so 6/11 means 11/6.
The 6th day of November.
Yes. I know this from Switzerland, and yet I forgot when I looked at it again. But when I looked at it, they've added some nice changes. So I did a 2-week residential experience. This one is a 3-week one for the next course. They're doing it over 2 years instead of 18 months, which I think is more reasonable. I know we got to the end and there was just a lot of papers I had to write, and I had to annotate all my hundreds of pages of observations, and that took a long time because I'm really good at observation and I write a lot down. So by the end I was kind of exhausted, plus finishing up the school year, because in Arizona the end of May is also the end of teaching. So I finished up the end of May, whereas I think this new schedule you have kind of the summer to finish up, which may be better. I didn't look at the exact calendar, but it's in modules, which is nice. If you get sick and miss a module, you can go back in 2 years or whatever and take that module again and still have credit for the other modules.
How long is each module?
So each module runs between 3 to 12 weeks. I think most of them were in the 6 to 9 week range. You're starting out with just foundational concepts of Montessori, all the good theory stuff. They always go with theory, and you're always but I want to see the practice. But that's how Montessori is. Get stuck in the theory first, then get into the practice. Then what we did was, then we looked at all the levels, 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 12, and really looked at how that foundation built on the adolescent level. And then we got into the adolescent stuff and what it is, how they change in the third plane, how their brain is rewiring, and how
they're just like toddlers.
They have the big feelings, yeah, and how toddlers are, they're big toddlers, yeah. Or you could say that toddlers are mini adolescents, but there's a parallel to those two planes, and you have to understand that. And they both need work with their hands. They both have these giant emotions that need help sometimes. They, having opportunities to express and create is really, really important in the adolescent realm of things. And so anyway, that part's really amazing. We did a lot of research papers, and for some people it was really hard. If English is not your first language, it's definitely going to take you longer, and you have to realize that. And our group, we really helped each other out. There were times that I attended a lecture, but I was too exhausted to take notes, and someone would share their notes with me, and I would share my notes with other people. So at least on the part of taking notes and sharing notes, we had a great community, and we helped each other. But your writing of your papers, you pretty much have to kind of do it on your own. We talk about it. We share our ideas with each other, because there is time for that. My favorite part of, oh, I miss it so bad. My favorite part of the Montessori training for 12 to 18 is seminar. Oh my gosh. Seminar is the best day of the week, is what Tina used to say.
Okay, hold that thought before we delve into that. Tell me what your favorite research topic was when you guys were working together.
Well, I mean, I love math. And so, and Mike Waskey's like an awesome trainer too. He does all the math stuff, and I learned so much from him. And I've even used his notes and with my math lectures that I've shared with parents, you know, since my training. So I did my research on financial literacy and micro-economy loans. I don't know, they call it micro lending.
I love it.
And it's kind of interesting because, you know, micro lending became really popular like 10 years ago, maybe even more like 20 or 30 years ago. I'm going to have to look at my paper to remember the exact dates, but you could go and say, I'm going to donate $10 to someone in Africa so that they can buy a cow. And then that person would buy a cow and start a business or whatever, and it was a tiny loan, and then they were supposed to kind of repay that into the organization so that more people could get microloans. And so my research topic was like, hey, what if Montessorians as a community did microloans with other schools, other businesses in other worlds, in other parts of the world? And how cool would that be to understand economics in another area? So, you know, by now there's a lot of research on how beneficial it was. There's also a lot of research on how these organizations, a lot of the main ones, are more profiteering than they should be. So really, if we wanted to do it, we'd have to kind of do it ourselves and not go with one of the big micro-lending organizations that takes a bunch of fees and stuff like that. But I still want to do it. I think it would really be cool to have like a sister school somewhere and do some, you know, some business transactions or something. You know, I mean, I still think how cool would that be to have, because all areas of the world have some really cool product that they could make, and they could trade with other Montessori schools, right? And sell them, and it would be unique and not just the same old things that you're like, oh yeah, I know it's just another way to pay for your trip, you know. I mean, Maria Montessori called this captive audience when you're selling to the families at the school, and I want to see. And I've seen it. I've seen where kids can go beyond the classroom and start it. A lot of the schools a lot of the students at my last school had their own businesses online and made things and sold things. And, you know, I showed them my businesses because I made a lot of money during COVID and, you know, stuff like that helped me really understand how easy it is if you can come up with something really unique to sell.
I remember the phone holders. Can you give us
Oh yeah, so one of the students made phone holders. That was last year. I mean, this year I bought a lot of cool stuff that was made on the 3D printer. I should show. One of them's a really cool fidget spinner kind of thing that's like rings within rings.
Whoa. And
I think I bought his last one because it was really cool. And so yeah, I mean, I can't say that I just bought things because they had a good pina colada too. Virgin pina colada, but yeah, that was really good. So yeah, so that production and exchange aspect, they also call it micro-economy, that's part of being an adolescent at a Montessori program is really, really important. And I mean, at my current school, they go to Europe for like 20 days. So everything that they sell, that they make, they're going on a big trip and they're gonna do something with it. So they're motivated to get all this stuff done. But the training was amazing. I mean, yeah, I had moments where I was really exhausted because I don't know anyone who was not teaching. In fact, one of the persons I studied with, and I gotta check up with her, see how she's doing, but she was actually finishing up 6 to 12 training while doing, and I think they were finishing up within months of each other, you know, and stuff like that. But she was able to do it. I mean, everybody in our cohort was definitely no stranger to work. They either owned their own school or they were teaching. I didn't know anyone who was a slouch, you know. There was even one who was homeschooling 3 kids in 3 different planes of development, as I recall, like
Wow.
or maybe 2 planes, I'm not sure, but still a lot of work involved, you know, and everyone worked hard and we helped each other. But yeah, so it was a lot of work.
So you kind of already covered it, but does it feel really good to be done with the training? Because I know you were so busy.
I kind of miss it. I'm really kind of sad. They had, okay, so here's what happened with me. Everyone else was already working at a farm adolescent program in some capacity, right? And I was too. But I was not satisfied with it. I realized from this how important the second plane really is, and how hard it is if they don't get what they need in the second plane, how hard it is to teach kids at the third plane and get them to where they need to go. And I could see that my school didn't recognize that they had an issue. I mean, it's true. You're a Montessori mom, you know this. Everybody leaves elementary weak in certain areas. You know, Maria Montessori called it like skipped stitches, right? But overall, if you're going to a good Montessori program, those strengths that you have, that you've developed, outweigh those weaknesses, right? But if you've just categorically missed out on lessons for 3 years, and if your mastery level is more like a 3rd grader than a 5th grader, right? Overall, I'm talking average, then it's really, really difficult with the level that's required at at the adolescent level. You know, it was just really difficult for me as a teacher. I relied on my experience in special ed. I relied on my experience in elementary, but also recognized that I couldn't just teach them in an elementary way. You know, I had to make it relevant because, you know, as Mike Waske says, you know, he traces the development of learning about triangles in the different grade level, in the different developmental levels, right? And when you're a little kid, you know, like 0 to 3, it's like, this is a triangle, right? Then you're in 3 to 6. Oh, this triangle has vertices, you know, this triangle has sides. You might classify triangles, right? Or no, you wouldn't classify. You would find the names of the triangles, right? But then in elementary, you're using your reasoning mind more. Oh, here's how to classify those different triangles. Here's how to find the area of the triangle. You know, here's how to find the area of a triangle as it relates to volume. You know, this is all this stuff you're doing with triangles. And then you get to middle school, and let's just say they know all that. It doesn't matter, because they're like, well, what's a triangle going to do for me? How does this relate to the real world? Am I going to be using triangles in real life? You know, so you can't just be like, here's how you find the area and here's how you find the volume. You can't just do that. You have to be like, this is why it's important to know about triangles. You know, they're engineering, this or that. You know, I mean, you have to find each person's interest and explain why this is a relevant math concept for them. And if you don't, you've just lost, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, but from that, I recognized that there was still more elementary left in me, that I wanted to go back to elementary with all of the stuff that I now knew about development, and I wanted to do that. And so, yeah, so now I'm doing upper elementary, but it's really handy because guess what? In these days, so many kids are hitting 3rd plane, middle of 5th grade. What do you do with them? Well, if you know how that developmental levels work, you can still reach them in upper L and still take care of their developmental needs. And so I'm glad I took the training, because this is something that they need to address in training. That the reality is, you have students who are hitting puberty younger, and what do you do with them? You know, you do have to recognize that you cannot teach them in the same way. that yes, you can appeal to their reasoning mind, but they also need to see where it appeals to their interests more and where it appeals to the real world more, because that's where they start focusing as they get older. So I'm elementary. One of my trainers said at one point, well, that would be a step back. And I thought about it. I'm like, no, because I'm going to be a really amazing upper L teacher, and I love upper L, I love being completely in charge of all aspects of my environment. Whereas when you're at the adolescent level, you have to coordinate with 6 other teachers, or 4 other teachers or 3 other teachers, depending on the size of your space, and make sure and coordinate with all the kids. And it's not that, it's a lot of work, but I realize I love being the queen of my domain. I just I like having everything, even though I know right now I'm really humbled because I have a lot I need to do to prepare my environment the way it needs to be prepared. We started off with like all the materials, all the basic AMI materials. My school's a great school, but there's just other little things that I'm like, I want this. I like to have a fabric number line for certain things. I know AMI people will shudder when I do lessons in statistics that's connected to the standards, and I don't want to just do a worksheet. Like most people, they'll just do some worksheets and throw them in there. That's not my style. I make materials that hit it, that they can make box and whisker plots and learn hands-on ways and not just a worksheet. So there's just a lot, because I've done special ed for a while and I've done different things, and it's been like 5 years since I've been an elementary guide, because I did adolescence, I did special ed, and I also did 8th grade math and science, which kind of propelled me to getting the adolescent training. So I'm grateful, but yeah, I'm exhausted. I had to work all summer. I'm looking forward to next summer where I'm still going to do tutoring and a few other little things, but I'm going to have a lot more downtime to get my room organized the way I want it to be organized. So yeah.
So for those of us who, not me, but for those who don't know what Montessori is, can you give a quick little synopsis of the difference between your 9 to 12 classroom and the 12 to 18?
So to understand Montessori, first you have to understand who started it. Montessori doesn't get a lot of credit compared to other developmental theorists, like the inventor of kindergarten, for example, or Piaget, or she was a woman, so sadly she didn't get as much credit. Oh, and that's another thing I have to say. I taught human development at ASU this last semester, and certainly everything I learned developmentally from the training course helped me a lot, because this was human development across the entire lifespan. So it was fun to add all these stories, from different parts of my Montessori experience. But anyway, Marie Montessori, she was a doctor. She was one of the first women doctors in Italy. She really didn't have any interest in being an educator per se, but she was interested in women's rights and mental health, and that's how she kind of snuck in the door for education. I wasn't interested in being an educator either, so I totally understand Maria Montessori. That just seemed like boring stuff that women do, come on, when all of my friends that I hung out with, they just wanted to be moms, and so I'm going to be a teacher, Well, Marie Montessori was in that same world, She wanted to be an engineer. You can't be an engineer, you're a woman. Well, too bad, I'm going to be a doctor then. That's just, Marie Montessori was one of those people. And when she toured an asylum after her medical training, and after she'd already had a medical practice and everything, that's when she recognized that these kids who were placed in these asylums because they couldn't pass the test to go to a regular school, she realized how smart they were. She saw them playing with their crumbs, and where other people were like, see how degenerate these kids are, she's like, no, look at how smart they are. They're using these crumbs to manipulate their environment. So she worked with these kids in the asylums, and within a year a lot of them were able to pass the test to go to regular school. And she did her research. She was following a lot of the advice of some of the pioneers in special education, so Sagan and Itard. A lot of this doesn't get talked about. A lot of people focus on her later work in early childhood, but her first work was in special ed. And it was actually teaching to the test to a certain degree, because they had to pass this test. She had to collect measurable data. But so these kids were able to go to the regular school with this intensive training, and it was intense. I mean, she worked like 12-hour days, in the asylums. She ended up having a child out of wedlock, which was a big no-no in the, early 1900s. And so she left that, and eventually someone approached her to start a school for ages 3 to 6. This is before daycare came around. Kids who weren't in school just kind of stayed with their parents, or if the parents were working, kind of were raised by siblings. So a 6-year-old could babysit a 3-year-old back then. So she took over. She had, I can't remember if it was 50 or 100. Do you remember the number? But she only had one assistant. It was a whole lot of children. And she took it on as an experiment, just to see what children wanted. She recognized through observation that children needed to work with their hands, that they needed to follow their interest, that they could, and that it needed to be connected to real life activity. And so, it wasn't just math and language that she was teaching. She was teaching them practical life skills. She was teaching them things related to all the senses. So she had subjects called practical life, sensorial, where children learned to take care of themselves and take care of the environment. And she learned that they could even choose work themselves. They didn't need to be controlled by the teacher. If the environment was prepared with all these activities, that the children would choose. And on her own, she figured out, oh, look, all these 4-year-olds, they just started spontaneously writing. Like, what? Back then they thought kids couldn't learn to read until age 7. So 4-year-olds, writing was big international news. And then people started to copy her concepts of her schools, and she started to offer training. And 3 to 6, which is called the primary level, or she called it in Italian Casa dei Bambini, which means children's house. That level is still really strong. You could go to any, like Montessori is mostly known for ages 3 to 6. You go to any Montessori school, a lot of them only have 3 to 6, right?
Yeah.
That's all they have.
That's the main foundation.
That's the main foundation, but from there she developed Nido, which is the infant community, and she developed a toddler community too. And so some Montessori programs, and I mean legit ones, not ones that just say they're Montessori, because daycares will even use the term. Hey, what's up? You're all stiffening. What you seeing? Anyway, they'll have they'll have 3 to 6, but they might have toddler or infant communities as well that feed into that. Elementary was developed later. It took, and really by the time I got 3 to 6 training in Texas, I needed the experience to see how it connected to elementary, because I got 6 to 12 training first, on the advice of one of my son's teachers, saying that you'll never not have a job if you, because I was debating which one to do, and he goes, well, you'll never not have a job if you do 6 to 12, and you'll get paid more. And I thought, okay, I'll take the other training later. But that 6 to 12 training, they use the Montessori materials, but they use them more with the child's reasoning mind, because at this age you can reason with them. And so where in 3 to 6, back to the triangle example, they have these constructive triangles that teach equivalency, but you're not using those terms. You're not saying, notice how those 3 triangles are the same as that one triangle, is the same, you're not saying a word. You're just, oh, look, we can stack these, right? It's all like completely visual, and then the child replicates it. Whereas when we get to elementary, oh, look, these triangles, they're equivalent. This group of triangles is equivalent to these, this single triangle, and these three triangles. We call that equivalent. Oh, look, you know how the Pythagorean theorem works because you have this nice little puzzle. You can also do Pythagorean theorem with polygons and these constructive triangles. Let me show you. So there's all these fun things that you do that they were experienced at, like, sensorially, but then you use their reasoning mind, and all of a sudden they're doing high school level math in 4th or 5th grade because they can, because their brains were primed with all these specialized materials that they used when they were younger. So 3 to 6 is the foundation. My oldest started in kindergarten. He still remembers all of his lessons. I mean, he's an engineer now. He's in material science, but he got interested in chemistry from the practical life lessons. I think I told you that, right? And polishing metal, polishing wood, polishing glass. He was like, I can't wait for another lesson, I'm going to learn to polish this and polish that. And, so that was his interest in chemistry. And it just continued to snowball when he was in elementary, researching and, combining chemicals for various purposes and stuff like that. So in 3 to 6, they're given lessons individually. You're not expecting kids to share unless they want to. The lessons are like 5 minutes. They can repeat them as much as they want. I know my son, my oldest anyway, he would make a puzzle map every week. Every week he'd sew on a couple buttons onto fabric. Every week he'd make some sort of a booklet, the parts of a bird, the parts of a turtle, whatever. He'd make some sort of booklet. And, if I wasn't part of the Montessori understanding of it all, think, are you learning to read and write? Well, yeah, he was learning to read and write. That was in the afternoon work cycle. And they call it work cycles too. They're just choosing for 3 hours whatever they want to work with, whatever they want to do. And then, but in the afternoon work cycle, the other kids would nap and the kindergartners would go and do reading and writing. And the day he bought his own cursive book, he was so excited. And he learned to read and write just like any kindergartner would. And but it's just a little different. You just have a lot more freedom to choose the things that you're working on, the things that you're studying. Maria Montessori recognized that kids just have, especially in 3 to 6, this natural desire to learn things. Now, it breaks down a little bit in elementary because there's varying degrees of understanding of Montessori principles. There's some that feel like, oh, I'm not going to give a lesson until a child asks for it. Well, if they're never going to ask to read or write, how are they going to know that reading and writing is important? You want to keep giving them lessons so that they want to, progress naturally in the standards of the day. But normally, if you're doing that, if you're giving lots of lessons to incite their curiosity, then stepping back and letting them research, they're going to want to go further out of the world. They're going to want to do, I've seen some really extensive goings out where they've gone to like, not just museums, but, like a power plant or a recycling center. They get an idea, observatory. They get an idea and they want to go out in the bigger world and explore it. And of course, it expands even more in that 12 to 18 level. The things that they plan to do, the big projects that they take on. But they still do a lot of big projects in lower L and upper L, and teaching both. It's amazing what these children can do. But you do have to give them the foundation, give them lessons, but then give them space so that they can explore and take that knowledge and make their own, what Maria Montessori calls self-construction, right? And we see kids with special needs that they can't focus worth a darn, right? But then there's a project that they have invested in or that they have an interest in, and all of a sudden they're just so hyper-focused, and it's fun to watch, because it's so much harder when you're the teacher and doing the sage on a stage, and you have to be this drama queen, and you have to really have this iron fist as well to keep everyone on the same page, everyone following with the lecture. But in Montessori, you can do a smaller group. You can just give every kid what they need. And yes, it's more work and it's more planning, and you shed more tears because you're really wanting to make sure everyone has what they need. But Montessori is amazing, and I'm a constructivist, so constructivist public school teachers, I love you. Be a Montessori teacher. It's even better than what you can do, in a traditional program. But yeah, so that's why I love Montessori. And 6 to 12, 12 to 18, it's all fun. There's nothing more rewarding than helping a child through their development and helping them gain that independence. And you get to the point where you can just step away and it doesn't matter. The kids solve the problems. They come together. They finish their work. You really are just a guide or a coach, and nothing more.
Can you give us a little bit of information about your 9 to 12 classroom and what it looks like, and then your ideal, you had mentioned earlier when we were chatting about the farm school in Montessori in Redlands.
Oh, yeah.
Something
I didn't talk about that.
Adolescent environment.
Okay, so our residential experience was in Redlands, and Redlands has a 20-plus-year-old program. In fact, I even got yearbooks that show how the program changed over the years, which I should show you sometime. But my trainers were actually founders of Grove School in Redlands, and Grove School in Redlands branched off from a private Montessori school called Montessori in Redlands, which you know very well because you worked there. And we toured there, so we actually got to tour the school. We got to observe some of the classrooms, the toddler classroom, and a 3 to 6, a giant 3 to 6 classroom, as well for part of our experience.
Now,
and
just to clarify, the Grove is 12 to 18, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's middle school and high school. And Montessori in Redlands goes up to 12. It goes up to 6th grade. So 7th and 8th grade is your middle school, and then 9th grade is you're kind of partially in middle school and partially in high school. It depends on where you are. So if you're a 9th grader and you're ready for algebra, you're going to be working more with high school students. But if you still need pre-algebra, you'd be working more with middle school students. So 9th graders kind of do both campuses. Their middle school campus is more on the other side of the street where the farm is, and their high school campus is more on the Montessori and Redlands side of things. So that's how they have it divided. Their teachers are amazing. When we were there the first time for a residential experience, it was summer. But that didn't mean we didn't see students, because they still had to take care of the farm. They still had projects that they were doing. They had this big project to bring raptors back to the area, and they recognized that they needed to change the habitat a little bit. And so there were some big engineering projects. There were some big maintenance projects that the kids were doing. We helped them a little bit with like some weeding and stuff like that. But that was our first impression of, and they ran the farmers market all summer as well. So that was the first impression of Grove School. And it was enough of an impression that I decided to come back for my observation. I had to do I had to do 2 weeks of observation, and I thought might as well make one of it in Grove School. And so I did. My husband, he works, that's one of the theaters he works at. So he
works for Harkins.
He works for Harkins, and they sent him down there, and I'm like, great, I'm going to come with you and observe at Grove School. And it made such an impression on me that I really wanted to move there. I mean, months later when they're like, oh, we need a worker in California, we seriously considered it. In fact, Montessori in Redlands was hiring, but they said that the salary range was like 40 to 50,000, and I'm like, yeah, no, not moving to California for Arizona teacher pay.
Yes, when I worked there, the pay was very low. It was challenging.
and if one of my trainers said, oh, you could have asked for more. I'm like, no, if they're putting that down as a range, and I'm asking for more, then I would know that I'm never going to make any more than that. Why? So I'm like, to me, that's a no deal. But I know that they paid more, like at the secondary level. But the thing was, I would have had to have worked at Grove School to get Joey to finish up his Montessori experience, right? Because they didn't start till 7th grade, and Montessori's been so good for Joey. So I did consider it, but in the end, decided not to. Decided to stay here. We kind of like our house. We kind of like, where we are, and I definitely love the school that I'm at now. But I did love the experience of seeing how independent the students were at Grove School. They put on a play written by the students. They did all the lighting, the sound, the makeup. You barely saw an adult there. Like, it was all kids helping. Did they have times where they were kids? Yeah. There were times the mom and me was like, ooh, be careful with that tall ladder, And I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. But they got it all done, and I was impressed. I really was. I was really impressed with how independent they were, how, they're in charge of the budget, the expenditures for the school. I'm talking like all the clubs and everything. I watched them. They were putting on a prom that week. Prom or homecoming, one of those. But there was a ton of activities going on, and they still did a lot of great academics too. But the independence level, the courteousness that I saw, the good behavior. They would have morning meetings, and it's just, you feel that Montessori spirit there. It is just awesome. The kids help in the kitchen too. They help do the cooking. They have they help in all the areas. I watched them do the yearbook, and how independent they were, and how skilled they were at layouts and all of this, whereas at other schools I've been at, the kids have kind of this ceremonial role, but it's still the adults doing most, pulling most of the strings. But no, at Grove, and of course this also I think is 20 years experience as well, they knew when to put kids in charge, and how important it is to step back and let them fail if they need to fail. I watched a conference with a student. They have to have these conferences and show their growth, with their guides. I'm trying to remember. There's always like a mentor guide that is in charge of any one particular person, but they have to demonstrate growth.
And the children lead the conferences.
Yeah, they lead the conferences. They show what they've learned, and it was amazing. I mean, it really was. The expectations were high, but the kids met it, and yeah, it would be a dream if they could create a school here like that. They made it public too, which of course I am a big proponent of public education. They wanted it to be for everybody, not just for, people who could afford the tuition. So
Right.
While there are people from Montessori and Redlands doing the private thing coming up to Grove School, they take a lot of outsiders too, and they do well. I would be observing. I'd be observing in the cafeteria, and I'd hear, when you're observing it as an adult, they don't care. These kids, they're just doing what they're doing, right? And I hear their conversations, and they're like, yeah, if you go to another school, they're not going to care about you. But if you go here, they are. And you hear them talk about just the differences between a regular school and Grove School. And, just so many neat things that I wrote down. Pages and pages. So
Montessori in Redlands is private, just to clarify.
Yeah.
And they're through 6th grade. or 12 years old.
Toddler
And then-
through
Yeah,
6th grade.
they had a toddler. Yep, toddler. They've been there for over 30 years. And then 12 to 18 is the Grove School, and the 12 to 15 is across the street from Montessori in Redlands, and then the 15 to 18, the high school component, is in the back campus. I actually did my observation there. I asked my trainer, Greg McDonald, he was phenomenal, if I could do an observation even though I was in elementary at the high school level. And he's like, well, I guess so. Yeah, go ahead.
That's awesome. I mean, when I was there, I was kind of at the mercy of whatever, and it was a last minute thing. So I found out about this trip like a week before, and I'm like, can I come to your school? You know, and luckily I already knew them because we were there for the summer, so I wasn't just some rando person. But he put out an email, and like I think 3 teachers said sure, you know, but they're like, don't worry, Liza, you can just go and observe, just stay out in the farm and watch, you know, and sure, it was cool, you know. I'd watch like 5 or 6 kids come in with weed whackers and totally clean out the chicken coop, you know, and I mean, just the things you see are amazing. But I observed a lot of math, and I observed math at the high school level, at the middle school level, and at the like special needs intermediate level. There were 3 teachers that were willing to let me in, and I mean, it was really cool. Some of them didn't even have Montessori training, but they were definitely very hands-on. They did projects where you could do, you know, like artwork and things like that. There was statistics. You could, if you weren't like an algebra person, you could take statistics in high school to count for one of your math classes. And they did a lot of really cool statistic projects that I saw. And that same teacher would also teach like pre-calculus and calculus. And I can't remember if it was calculus or pre-calc, but there was a kid, Montessori kid, in one of them that was like, why do I have to do this? You know, like she wanted them to research a concept ahead of time before they did it. And he's like, why do I have to do that? And the other 2, he's like, that's not Montessori. And the other 2 were like, we've known you since you were a toddler, and this is Montessori, and here's why you need to do it, so that you can understand this concept or whatever. Yeah, they're like talking them off the wall. It was the best observation ever. Like, I'm like, that's just it. That's like, some of these Montessori kids, they have to realize there's a purpose to things.
too, right?
But
Because in public school, they put their little lights out and they just sit there.
They just,
like
you just
little
learn.
drones.
You just learn to sit there and not question anything. I mean, I love that guy for questioning things. He actually made this really cool outfit too that I liked, where he'd cut up hoodies in certain ways to turn it into like a jacket, and you know. Anyway, just my kind of Montessori kid. I want kids to question things. I think it's healthy. And it was also healthy that his friends talked him back to it. You know, it was like, here's why it's important. You
Exactly. The teacher didn't tell him. His friends did. That's Montessori for you.
So, I mean, and I love these strong-willed Montessori kids for that, you know. And these are legitimate things. These aren't the same as, like, letting kids manipulate you into having a Halloween party when the school doesn't celebrate Halloween, you know. That's a different thing. That's not a good thing, but I'm talking about legitimate concerns and feelings. Bring them out, you know, talk about it, resolve it, you know. That's what's great about Montessori.
I'll never forget. So during my student teaching, I was at a school in Pasadena, California, Altadena, California, and there were these 3 boys. I might have told you this story before. 3 boys who were talking about religion. And they had the book of Confucius open in front of them. And they're debating religion. And this other little guy comes up and says, if you don't accept Jesus Christ into your life, then your soul is not going to be saved. And Christianity is the main foundation. And it turned into this really fascinating argument where this other guy said, you know, there's so many different religions in the world. There's so many different ways you can look at this, and how can you say that? And it was so fascinating. These were 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
And they started a debate on religion. It was great.
Oh, I remember, Josh, he's 27 now, but he came home from first grade. He's like, well, my teacher believes in the gods of the Greeks, but I believe in the God of creation. Now, they were studying Greek mythology, but for some reason he had the idea that they were like, I don't know, heretics or something. But that's just developmental. He wasn't second plane yet. He was still first plane when he moved up to first grade. And so, he couldn't see the reasoning of studying another religion. He just, this person believes that, and that's why they're teaching it,
Exactly.
So and then he would talk to his friends apparently. Well, do you believe in the God of creation, or do you believe in the Greek gods?
That's cute.
So we had all kinds of conversations about what he talked about at school. Like, okay.
So, final question. We're almost at an hour, so we'll sum this up soon,
Okay.
guys. But what would you tell someone who was thinking about taking the 12 to 18 training?
I would say do it. I mean, okay, here's what you need to be a successful guide at the adolescent level. You want to have multiple skill areas that you can teach adolescents. Especially the smaller the school, the more specialties you would need. They're not giving, so in 6 to 12 training, they're actually giving you the curriculum. They call it cosmic education. They're giving you all the lessons to teach, and then you have to come up with your own for, standards-based things as the curriculum changes. But for the 12 to 18 training, they're not giving you a curriculum per se. They're not like, oh, here's all the math lessons you need to teach. Here's all the language lessons. They're not giving you that. They're giving you the philosophy of how to work with adolescents and how to design your curriculum. So if you have not had an understanding of the basics of how to teach language, how to teach math, of, understanding what the standards are for that level, then you might have a hard time kind of narrowing things down, because you're not going to get that. You're not, it's not like elementary training where we had all that drilled. They're not giving you a curriculum. They're teaching you how to find it. And, like, for example, when we did our residential experience, we were researching issues related to Redlands, California. So one of the choices we could look at was water use and how so we studied water usage. We studied, in our case, we looked at the Colorado River watershed, which covers California and all these other states that we all lived in, and so it was kind of relevant to both of our areas. Or at least some of the people in the group, not everybody, but some of the people in the group. And we had to go and do research on water rights and research on how much, what's an acre foot of water. So these are all math lessons and language lessons that you're learning within the context of who gets the water. How do we determine that? Like, we had narrowed down the questions that we wanted to study as quote unquote adolescents. And then we had to do the research in these different areas. So as a guide, you have to be knowledgeable enough to help a kid figure out, how many acre feet of water is that? How do we divide up, these things or whatever? So you'd have to look at the math, the geometry, the language, the history. And so that's what you're doing. You're creating these giant projects connected to real people. I mean, you would go out and interview experts in the area. You would go to government meetings. You're doing all this heavy, this is beyond going out in elementary.
Exactly.
It's
like advanced going out.
Yeah, you're working with adults. You're working with real money. And so that's what you're learning when you take the 12 to 18 training, how to do all those things for all your adolescent learners and meet their needs.
Now, at the farm school, I remember when I went to the orientation with you at your school, that the gentleman who's in charge did that presentation, and he talked about how the children are given the state standards and they design their own curriculum. Would you say that the 12 to 18 training helps the teacher present in such a way so the children can design their own curriculum? At the farm school, were they still in charge to a certain degree?
Oh, is that what they said when you toured Grove School?
No, that was when I was at your school here. That gentleman, Adam.
Oh, Adam. Yeah, okay. It was getting in that direction. It still had a ways to go at that particular school.
Right, but at the farm school, were the children a little bit more independently involved in designing their own curriculum?
In certain areas they were. So
Okay.
there were some kids that were super independent. And like I did for one of my projects, I wanted them to come up with a math story and take a concept, but we looked at even like, those word books for babies, like physics for babies and stuff like that. And some of them did really well. Some of them had things that they could have commercially made money on. We just ran out of time,
Wow.
Others didn't really do anything. It just wasn't their thing. So it just depended on the individual, and we didn't have fully people who had been doing Montessori like the whole time, like a healthy Montessori education. And so that, the more internal motivation you have, the more you are able to just be a self-starter. So we did have ones that were self-starters, and then we had others that were like, why should I do anything?
Right.
And that was hard,
And so you were talking about your training with 12 to 18,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives you a broad spectrum of different topics.
Yes.
But when I came into the classroom and I was observing, I noticed that there are teachers in little areas.
Oh, yeah.
In the 12 to 18.
You have to have those,
The specialty teachers.
the specialty teachers. And I mean, a huge part of the program is there's seminar, for example. You have math seminar, you have seminar covering things with history, with science, you're reading things that are important and you're discussing it, you're breaking it apart as a group. And the students take turns leading seminars. So there's a lot of that that's building that critical thinking and the ideas. So I mean, and it depends on the school. Like if you have a smaller program, you're going to have a guide that teaches math and science and language, maybe. At my school last year, they had a different specialist. I was the only one that did math. There was one person who did science. There was one person who did humanities. We even had a teacher who did Latin. We had a lot of specialists, which enabled us to do a lot of neat things in terms of specialty areas. But yeah, it depends on the school,
Okay. So, yeah, that's fascinating. Well, we are approaching an hour. And I hope you guys found it entertaining enough to sit through at least part of it. If not, come back and watch it in little chunks.
I mean, it's more interesting when you see it in action.
Exactly. You got to go observe a school.
Go observe a school, see who's letting you, find somebody who will let you be there and ask questions, or at least just sit in the corner and be a fly on the wall. And I would start with primary. Start with observing a 3 to 6 program anywhere you can, I mean, my current school does toddler through adolescent, and in fact, the adolescent guides over there have the same trainers as me, some of them, which is kind of cool. But some of the terminology has changed. Like my trainer says, oh, we don't use occupations anymore, but when they were in training, they do. So it's kind of interesting how some of the names have changed, but the concept of how to meet the needs of adolescents, how to create the program for them. They call it the plan of work and study. That's really strong, and I'm really impressed with the adolescents we have at our school, and all the things that they do and how they carry themselves. And we watched a play that they put on recently, and yeah, it was just cool. So
That's amazing.
Joey's excited to. Ours is you go upstairs, and that's so. There's not really a farm. I mean, there's a little bit of a farm, but we don't
They are
really
starting
have
a garden
animals.
in the
Yeah,
back.
they have the garden. They
Big
don't have
garden.
the animals
It's
because they're
beautiful.
not allowed to. But you don't have to have the animals. A lot of urban programs don't have animals, but you can still learn about microeconomy concepts without it. So, you know.
So, and also, if you are thinking of taking the training, a lot of the schools, you can shed some light on this, a lot of the schools are offering sponsorships.
Yeah, a lot of the schools will sponsor you. I would highly recommend working as an assistant while taking training. Then you don't have to kill yourself like I did. The first time I did 6 to 12 training, I did the academic year, and I took my kids, and we all just went to Milwaukee for a year. It took 5 years off my life. I'll not lie. I had to get a tonsillectomy by, the day of graduation. I had a tonsillectomy because I kept getting strep infections and it wasn't going away, and I would stop breathing at night because my tonsils were so inflamed, and couldn't sleep. So that was really hard because you do have to memorize a curriculum for 6 to 12 training. But it's a different kind of challenge in 12 to 18. You're having to synthesize so much and bring it together and do a lot of writing on your own too. But worth it, definitely worth it. Definitely love Train Montessori. That's the program. That's who I went with, and they're now based out of Cleveland. Not that it really matters because it's all online except for the residential part. And they come to you like when you're doing your they observe you in your classroom and everything too as part of your final exams and everything. And I had Jenny Hoagland as my examiner, and I learned so much from her as well. She's the one based out of Sweden, and they have their own training in Sweden too for the AMI diploma. And if you've already taken the orientation course, you can get the diploma. You can get an AMI diploma now. They're working on that where you can show 5 years experience, and then they give you a 12 to 18 diploma as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So,
That's awesome.
yeah, that's what they're doing.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us here today. Thank you, Liza.
No, you're welcome.
Please feel free to ask us any questions, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video.
Yeah. Say bye, buddy.
Bye, Rango.
It's like, I need my son.
It's an absolutely gorgeous day here in Mesa, and
Yep,
we're
it is.
enjoying this weather.
Definitely.
Have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks.